There is a part of you that you do not show to the world, a face that you hide not only from others, but even from yourself. This is what Carl Jung called the shadow. It is not simply darkness, nor merely evil, but the sum of everything that you have repressed, denied, or exiled from the daylight of your conscious mind. The shadow whispers in the silence, and though you may not hear it, it is always there, guiding your fears, shaping your desires, and bending the course of your destiny. To understand the shadow is to enter a dialogue with the invisible. It is to look into a mirror that does not flatter you, that does not smile back, but instead shows you the crooked, unpolished aspects of your being. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The shadow is precisely this unconscious that pulls the strings of your life when you are unaware. Imagine for a moment that every judgment you cast on another person, every irritation, every envy, every hatred, is not simply about them. It is about you. It is the shadow pointing to something you cannot accept in yourself. When you accuse someone of arrogance, perhaps your shadow hides your own repressed pride. When you despise someone's weakness, maybe it is your own vulnerability you fear to face. The shadow projects itself outward, making you believe that the world is full of enemies, when in truth it is a battlefield within your own soul. The shadow is not evil by nature. It is not a demon to be destroyed. It is a teacher, a guardian of the truth that you cannot yet bear. Like the Greek myths of gods who disguise themselves as beggars or strangers, the shadow appears in forms you may detest, but beneath the disguise it holds a gift. To face it is painful, but to deny it is destructive. Think about the times you have lost control. A sudden burst of anger that shocks you, a desire that feels forbidden, a thought that frightens you. These are not accidents. They are eruptions of the shadow, reminding you that what is suppressed does not die. It waits. Freud compared repression to holding a lid on boiling water. You can push down with all your strength, but eventually the steam will escape, often in violent or distorted ways. The shadow is that steam, that pressure building within the psyche, demanding release. But why do we create a shadow in the first place? Because as children, we learn that certain parts of us are unacceptable. Maybe you were told not to cry, so you pushed away your sensitivity. Maybe you were scolded for being too loud, so you buried your vitality. Maybe your curiosity was punished, so you silenced your questions. Slowly, you built a mask, the persona, the acceptable self, and everything else, everything that did not win approval, was cast into the dark basement of your being. That basement is the shadow. Yet the paradox is this: the very qualities you hide are often the source of your greatest power. A child told not to be too sensitive might grow up hiding empathy, when in truth that empathy could heal others. A child told not to be too stubborn might suppress their determination, though that determination could one day change the world. The shadow hides not only shame, but also treasure. Rilke once wrote, "Perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being, something helpless that wants help from us." What you call terrible in yourself may simply be something unloved, waiting for your compassion. Imagine you are walking through a forest at night. The trees loom tall, their shadows stretching across your path. You hear whispers in the wind, the crack of branches. Fear grows. But what if you carried a lantern? Suddenly, what looked like a monster becomes only a tree. What sounded like a threat becomes only the rustle of leaves. The shadow within is the same. In darkness, it terrifies you. With light, it reveals itself as part of the landscape of your soul. Nietzsche said, "One must have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." That chaos is not the enemy of creation. It is its raw material. The shadow is your chaos. To integrate it is to turn chaos into creativity, pain into wisdom, wounds into portals. Joe Dispenza, though speaking in the language of neuroscience rather than myth, points to the same truth. The emotions you suppress remain trapped in your body, cycling endlessly until you face them and release them. The shadow is psychological, but it is also energetic. Have you ever felt drained around someone, only to realize that it was not them but your own suppressed emotions rising to the surface? Have you ever had the same problem repeat itself again and again, like a pattern that life refuses to let go? These are signs of the shadow in action. Jung said, "What you resist persists." The more you try to escape your shadow, the more power it gains. The only way out is through. Facing the shadow does not mean indulging every dark impulse. It means acknowledging it, bringing it into the light of awareness, and giving it a voice without letting it dominate. Think of it like integrating a lost member of your family. You do not let them rule the house, but you also do not banish them to die outside. You give them a seat at the table, a place to belong, so that the family of your psyche can be whole. The shadow reveals itself in dreams. Jung dedicated much of his life to dream analysis because he believed dreams were the royal road to the unconscious. In dreams, your shadow may appear as a figure chasing you, a stranger, an animal, or even a distorted version of yourself. Pay attention, these are not random images. They are coded messages from the hidden depths, inviting you to recognize what you have ignored. But here lies the danger. If you refuse to meet your shadow, it will take control in ways you cannot imagine. History itself is a testament to this. Whole nations project their shadow onto the other, creating enemies, scapegoats, wars. Jung warned that the shadow is not only personal, but collective. What you see in politics, in hatred, in division, is humanity's shadow rising. When denied, it becomes destructive. When faced, it can become the ground for compassion. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, what part of me have I refused to see? Is it my anger, my envy, my lust, my fear, my need for approval? And beneath those, what longing, what pain, what unmet need lies hidden? For every shadow trait is not simply a flaw, it is a wound. And wounds, when tended, can become sources of strength. Rilke wrote, "The only journey is the one within." To walk that journey is to enter the cave of your shadow. It is to sit with your demons and discover that they are, in truth, angels in disguise. The shadow does not disappear when you integrate it, it transforms. It becomes an ally, a source of creativity, of depth, of authenticity. Think of the great works of art, the music that moves you, the poetry that breaks your heart open. Much of it was born from shadow. The artist who faced despair, the poet who wrestled with longing, the musician who channeled grief. They did not deny their shadow. They gave it form, and in doing so, they transformed private pain into universal beauty. Your life, too, can become such a work of art if you dare to face what your shadow hides about you. The shadow has always been feared, ignored, or condemned. Yet in Jung's vision, the shadow is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a teacher to be listened to. And herein lies one of the greatest paradoxes of human existence. What we most desperately try to suppress in ourselves often contains the very treasure we are looking for. Have you noticed how life keeps bringing you back to the same patterns, as if you were caught in an invisible loop? The same type of relationships, the same conflicts, the same mistakes dressed in new clothes. This is not random. This is your shadow at work, silently guiding your destiny from the depths of the unconscious. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The shadow hides precisely in those blind spots, those corners of ourselves we do not want to see. And as long as we run from them, they grow in silence, shaping our behaviors, our desires, even our so-called choices. Let's consider an example. Imagine a man who is constantly betrayed in love. He thinks he is just unlucky, or that women cannot be trusted. Yet in truth, he might be unconsciously attracted to people who reflect his own inability to commit. His shadow, fear of intimacy, fear of vulnerability, creates situations that force him to confront it. But because he refuses to look inward, he repeats the same story again and again. The shadow is not only a personal force, it is archetypal. It is woven into the collective. Wars, violence, oppression, these are not simply political events, they are eruptions of the shadow of entire societies. Jung warned that what humanity represses collectively will return on a massive scale. The atrocities of the 20th century were not accidents. They were the shadow unleashed upon the world. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If you do not face your own shadow, you feed the collective one. Every judgment you project outward, every hatred you cultivate, every refusal to see yourself clearly adds weight to the darkness of the whole. This is why shadow work is not just personal healing, it is an ethical responsibility. So how do we begin? How do we dare to walk into that cave within ourselves, where the monsters wait? The first step is courage. The courage to admit that you are not only light. Jung emphasized that wholeness does not come from identifying with the pure, the virtuous, or the socially acceptable. Wholeness comes from embracing the paradox, that within you lives both saint and sinner, both healer and destroyer, both angel and beast. The second step is awareness. Start by noticing your projections, the people who irritate you, who trigger you, who awaken an irrational intensity in your reactions. These are messengers. They reveal fragments of your shadow. Every time you say, "I could never be like that," you should pause, because the shadow often hides precisely there. Nietzsche, another master of the depths, wrote, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster himself. For when you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." This abyss is the shadow. The danger is real. If you engage with it unconsciously, you may drown. But if you learn to look at it with awareness, the abyss becomes a mirror that shows you your hidden strength. The journey into the shadow is often mistaken for a descent into evil, but in truth, it is a descent into truth. And truth is rarely comfortable. Imagine standing before a mirror that does not flatter you, that does not show you the carefully curated version of yourself you present to the world, but the raw, unfiltered image of who you are when no one is watching. That mirror is the shadow. Jung explained that what we repress does not disappear, it waits. The child who was told never to express anger grows into the adult who explodes uncontrollably at the smallest provocation. The girl who was taught that desire is shameful grows into the woman who sabotages intimacy or hides her sexuality. The boy who learned that vulnerability is weakness becomes the man who cannot ask for help, who buries his pain under addictions or endless achievements. The shadow is patient. It will wait decades if it must, but eventually it demands to be seen, and when it is ignored too long, it bursts forth as crisis, the midlife collapse, the unexpected illness, the sudden breakdown of a marriage or career. These are not punishments, they are awakenings. They are the shadow's way of saying, you cannot live divided forever. But why are we so afraid of this confrontation? Because we believe that to face the shadow is to admit we are unworthy. Society teaches us to polish our image, to present ourselves as successful, virtuous, and in control. To admit rage, envy, lust, selfishness feels like failure. But Jung insisted that denying these parts of ourselves is the true failure. Integration, not perfection, is the goal. Consider the myth of the hero's journey, repeated across cultures. The hero always encounters a dragon or monster guarding a treasure. That monster is the shadow, and the treasure it guards is our wholeness. If the hero kills the dragon blindly, he gains nothing, But if he learns to face it, to understand it, to integrate its power, he returns transformed. Think of the dragon not as something to be slain, but as an energy to be harnessed. Anger, when acknowledged, becomes the fire of justice. Fear, when understood, becomes the guardian of wisdom. Desire, when accepted, becomes the pulse of creativity. Every shadow contains a gift, but only if you dare to open it. This is why Jung's work resonates so deeply today. In a world obsessed with positivity, with curating perfect lives on social media, shadow work is revolutionary. It demands honesty. It asks us to show up not as masks, but as whole beings, messy, flawed, contradictory, yet infinitely real. Let me ask you, what are you hiding from others? What are you hiding from yourself? Is it your anger, your sadness, your secret longing? The very thing you are ashamed to admit may be the key to your liberation. The poet Rilke once wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once, with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being, something helpless that wants help from us. What if your shadow is not a monster but a wounded child? What if the anger you fear is actually your inner voice crying out for boundaries? What if the envy you despise is actually pointing you toward your unlived potential? What if the shame you bury is simply asking for compassion? To walk with the shadow is to become intimate with your humanity. It is to stop pretending to be perfect and to start living as whole. Yet, beware, shadow work is not a quick fix. It is not about reading a quote and feeling inspired for a moment. It is daily, relentless honesty. It is journaling your darkest thoughts. It is admitting the lies you tell yourself. It is apologizing when you are wrong. It is daring to love the parts of you that you were taught to hate. And here lies the paradox. The more you embrace your shadow, the lighter you become. Not because the shadow disappears, but because it no longer controls you. Freedom is not the absence of darkness, but the ability to walk with it in peace. The path into the shadow is not meant to humiliate you, but to liberate you. Every suppressed rage, every hidden desire, every wound you've denied is energy locked away, waiting to be reclaimed. And when you dare to face it, something extraordinary happens. What once enslaved you becomes your source of freedom. Think about anger. Unacknowledged, it poisons your relationships, burns your health, and sabotages your peace. But when you accept it, when you learn to channel it, that anger transforms into clarity, into boundary, into the fire that fuels your courage. The same is true of jealousy, shame, fear. Each shadow carries the seed of its opposite. The darkness you fear most contains the very light you are seeking. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey of becoming whole. Not perfect, not flawless, but whole. To individuate is to integrate the shadow, to weave it into consciousness until you are no longer fragmented, but united within yourself. And in that union, you discover power. Not the power of domination, but the power of authenticity. When you hide your shadow, you wear masks. You become what others expect, or what you believe will protect you. But masks are heavy, and they suffocate the soul. To live behind them is to live half a life. Jung reminded us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not just light, not just darkness, but the dance between the two. But let us be honest, shadow work is not comfortable. It means admitting you are not as innocent as you thought, not as pure, not as different from those you despise. It means sitting with your own hypocrisy, your own cruelty, your own selfishness. Yet it also means reclaiming your hidden talents, your neglected passions, your secret longings. For the shadow does not only contain the ugly, it also hides the beauty you were too afraid to express. Consider the artist who never paints because she was told as a child she had no talent. That creativity becomes shadow, Consider the man who suppresses his tenderness because he was taught that men do not cry. That sensitivity becomes shadow. The shadow is not only your darkness, it is also your light, exiled. This is why Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Enlightenment is not an escape into bliss, but a descent into the very places you have avoided. It is not about transcending your humanity, but embodying it fully. Now imagine a world where people actually practice this. A world where leaders owned their shadows instead of projecting them onto nations. A world where couples took responsibility for their projections instead of blaming each other endlessly. A world where you and I embrace the paradox of who we are instead of pretending. Such a world would not be free of conflict, but it would be free of the lies that fuel destruction. The shadow is calling you right now. You can feel it in your triggers, in your repetitive struggles, in your restless dreams. It whispers in your anxieties, it speaks through your body, it shouts in the patterns you cannot seem to break. And every time you turn away, it waits patiently, knowing you cannot escape yourself forever. So here is the invitation. Stop running. Sit with your darkness. Write down the things you are most ashamed of. Look into the eyes of your envy, your rage, your grief. Not to drown in them, but to reclaim the gold hidden within them. Remember, the treasure you seek is guarded by the dragon you fear. This is not about perfection. It is about wholeness, about standing in the middle of your contradictions and saying, this too is me. The moment you can do that, you are no longer ruled by the shadow. You are guided by it. You walk into life with integrity, because you are not hiding from yourself. And maybe, just maybe, this is what Jung meant when he said that the greatest privilege is to become who you are. To be yourself, not the polished version, not the edited mask, but the raw, complete, paradoxical self that contains both heaven and hell. So I ask you, what is your shadow hiding? What have you been afraid to admit, not only to the world, but to yourself? Because until you face it, it will continue to write your story in silence. But the moment you turn toward it, your destiny changes. If this message has touched something in you, if you feel the shadow stirring inside, then let this be your first act of integration. Write in the comments, I choose wholeness, not light, not darkness. Wholeness.